Metro on WDET. I'm Tia Graham. A quick heads up, in this conversation we will discuss and describe acts of child online sexual exploitation. Some of what we talk about may be disturbing or triggering for some audiences, so please take care while listening. A few years ago, a 14-year-old girl from Brighton became a victim of it. She met a man who claimed to be 20 years old on a dating app called Wiz. The man then lured the young girl to his home in Dearborn Heights, where he proceeded to drug, sexually assault her, and take nude photos. The man has since fled the country, and the girl's mother is now in a legal battle with Lyft, the rideshare app the girl used to get to the man's home. The mother is suing the service for transporting a minor without proper verification. We should note that both Lyft and Uber offer family profiles that allow parents to receive a notification the second a ride starts and track the car's movement in real time. You can set it up with a trusted contact like a parent who must receive a unique PIN before the ride can begin. The story highlights the many different ways kids are vulnerable online, how adults who have bad intentions can find different ways to talk, coerce, and do harm to children. So today on the Metro, we're tackling a really serious topic. Online child exploitation is a criminal act that targets the most vulnerable people in our communities, kids and teens. Online child exploitation comes in many different forms, including online grooming, enticement, and solicitation. The Report Act, which passed in 2024, changed how we categorize these crimes. Since then, it's been unclear how we measure just how frequent the behavior is. So today, we want to see where we stand. Catherine Siegfried Speller is a professor in the School of Criminal Justice at Michigan State University, and she joins me now. She's an expert on the criminal behaviors behind online child sex offenders. Professor Siegfried Speller, welcome to the Metro.
Hello.
Hello. So we've been given, or I've given, a brief definition of what online child exploitation means. Now let's break it down. The term online grooming. Listeners may have an idea of what it looks like. They probably understand it's a big idea, a big deal. But what is the actual definition?
Yeah, so online grooming is essentially it's a form of manipulation and deception in which an adult builds a relationship of trust with someone. So usually, in this case, we're talking about minors, so individuals under the age of 18. And the purpose of, this deception, this manipulation, this trust building is with the intention of exploiting or harming them. So usually in a sexual way, maybe they are trying to obtain child sexual abuse material, so, selfies and sex, or they might be trying to meet that minor in the real physical world for sexual purposes.
And how frequent are acts of online child exploitation occurring? How is it reported?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we really don't know what the exact prevalence of this is, primarily because of, different reporting mechanisms. We know that, for instance, girls are more likely to report it than boys. But we do know that consistently since COVID, we have seen an increase in the number of reports to the National Center for National Center for NETMIC. So I don't know why I'm struggling on this, but the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
Yes,
there we go.
Yes.
So NETMIC, we've seen a really big increase in this ever since COVID. And part of that is because, more of us are online now. A lot of us are remote workers. But also, I think this new generation of minors and kids have access to technology earlier. So they have smartphones, they have tablets, and they're using the internet. And so when you have an increase in accessibility to the internet, that means you have more potential victims and also more potential offenders.
And what are common spaces where it happens online? Are there particular apps or websites that are more common to attract perpetrators of the act?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So anywhere on the internet, we're seeing this on social media. social media platforms like Instagram, Snapchat, Roblox, gaming platforms, any sort of messaging and chat apps. So you might think of Facebook Messenger or even WhatsApp, video sharing platforms as well. I mean, it really is any place where a minor is going to be. So what these offenders are doing is they're targeting certain types of platforms based on the likelihood of there being potential minors using them. So again, Instagram, Roblox. The other thing too is that they're going to try to move those platforms. So they might meet somebody on Instagram or Snapchat, and then they might ask that person to move to a different platform because they think they might be monitored, or they think that their parents may not be aware of these other, messaging platforms and social media platforms.
Now, Professor, I recently spent a little time with my nephew this weekend. He was on YouTube the whole entire weekend. I had been doing research for this particular conversation, and I thought to myself, what's the likelihood that he'll be contacted through YouTube or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So anywhere, offenders are smart. And so if a minor is using that platform, then they're going to be targeting those platforms. So YouTube, I would be concerned about that as well.
Mm-hmm. And if you can break it down for us, the difference between what we're seeing right now. So the umbrella of online child exploitation, there are different ways that we can talk about it. There are different forms that it takes. Can you talk about the difference between solicitation, grooming, and enticement? Is there a difference, and does one lead to the other?
Yeah, so grooming is really sort of the tactic that offenders are using. And when we talk about, let's say, online solicitation, this is essentially when the offender might be soliciting the minor for sexually explicit images, asking them to send nudes. They might be asking the victim to meet them in the physical world for sex. They might even be willing to pay, provide gifts. So that's solicitation. And then when we think about, so sexual extortion, for example, that's another type of online solicitation that occurs. It also uses grooming, that deception building. But essentially, in this case, the offender usually pretends to be a minor as well, will send nudes to the minor and then sexually extort them. So once that victim sends a nude themselves, they might say, if you don't send me more nudes, I'm going to post all over social media that you sent me your nudes, or I'm going to, send these nudes to your parents or to your friends on social media, to your school, or they might ask for money. So there's a financial extortion as well. So they'll say, if you don't send me money through Cash App or Venmo, for example, then I'm going to share your nudes. And so we see, within the online space that the grooming is really the tactic that is being used to build trust and to deceive these minors in order for the offenders to engage in things like sexual extortion or solicitation.
Now, Professor, how common are these behaviors compared to what the public understands? I know we talked a little bit about the trends, but how common is this?
Yeah, so I would honestly, again, prevalence is really difficult to know, but I would say it's common. And I think it's because, we don't, these kids are not going to tell their parents that they're talking to somebody online and that this person maybe has asked them for things, or has offered them gifts. Some kids might just ghost the conversation and then never report it. So we really don't know how frequently, this is occurring online, but it's very common. And unfortunately, in some cases, kids may not realize that it's grooming and sexual extortion. I had a friend of mine whose son said it was catfishing. So he didn't even know that this was a crime, that this was something that, that he was the victim of child exploitation, that he just said, oh, somebody tried to catfish me online. And so if the kids don't even know that there's something wrong with it, then they're not going to report it.
Wow, that is an amazing way to look at it. I mean, I often hear even my nieces and nephews say, things like that, like, oh, that person tried to catfish me, or that person tried to deceive me, not understanding the severity of the situation that had just occurred.
Exactly.
We're talking about the increase in cases of online grooming involving children and
Mhm.
teens. Our guest is Catherine Siegfried Spiller, a professor in the School of Criminal Justice at Michigan State University. Now, Professor, earlier we listed a number of digital apps and platforms where minors are in danger. The platforms oftentimes have some age restriction policies in place. How
Mhm.
are offenders able to get around these restrictions?
Yeah, so one of the things that's actually been very problematic in the last couple of years is that these social media platforms are now encrypting the chat data, essentially, so the messages that they're sending. So prior to this, if there was an instance of grooming where an offender was chatting with a minor in a way that might flag concerns with the social media app, they could report it. But now, because those messages are encrypted, social media platforms, for instance, like Instagram, they're not going to be able to report those conversations because they don't see them anymore. The only things that they can report are other features that they might be measuring. But so that's one of the big problems is that these offenders know that. And so they're going to stick with those type of platforms that are using encryption. For instance, WhatsApp is another great example.
Wow. So if we could just break that down for just a moment, because there are new features here that you're talking about. I know that I read that within the Report Act. I'm just learning a little bit about that. But what other features there that you're describing are limiting access to the information that are being, information of online grooming that's happening with the kids?
Yeah, so I would say encryption is the big one. That's the one that's going to be kind of limiting it. And then the other thing too is I always remind parents is that, kids these days are not different from when we were kids, right? So I always think back to how I wasn't allowed to watch certain TV shows.
Yeah.
So what did you do? You just watched those TV shows at your friend's house.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's right? Or you played those video games you weren't allowed to. You went to your friend's house. And so even if a parent doesn't allow their child to have access to social media, maybe, they're not allowing them to have a teen account on Instagram, for example, that doesn't mean that their kid then isn't using somebody else's cell phone if their friend is allowed to have access to that social media application.
How do groomers typically present themselves online? What are the red flags that something may be off about this individual I'm speaking to right now?
Yeah. So, what are some of the things that that kids could be aware of, or parents? And so, really, it's the type of deceptions and things that they're using, right? So they tend to try to gather personal information. They might ask the child about their family and school life, and a lot of times their emotions and some of the familial problems that they may be experiencing. And that's because they want to try to isolate that child, and they want that child to feel like, I am the only person that understands you. If you have an alcoholic parent, or maybe you have siblings that are really cruel to you, or maybe you're being bullied in school, this individual is going to come in like a knight in shining armor and say, I understand what you're going through. I also was bullied. I am here for you. And it encourages that secrecy and that essentially that isolation and dependence. And so that's another thing for that kids should be looking out for, and that parents should be looking out for as well.
Yeah. And Professor, thinking about just once again grooming and how it progresses, how how quickly can grooming, that situation escalate?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So what's interesting is, for instance, there's a type of grooming that we call sexual extortion that is really targeting about 14 to 15-year-old boys right now. And that type of extortion progresses very quickly. So it usually starts off on social media. They'll get a random, direct message or a friend request. That person ends up creating a very sexual conversation very quickly. It escalates within, I would say, 30 minutes, 15 minutes. They might send that or that minor, that 15-year-old boy, a nude, and then they ask for a nude in return, and then that's what ends up leading to either some sort of financial extortion or requesting more images. So that type progresses very quickly. I mean, that can take maybe 30 minutes. The other type that we tend to see with, adolescent females, for example, that might take longer. So that could take, weeks to build trust. But again, the thing that is so, it's crazy to think about this, that these offenders are chatting with multiple victims at the same time. So if a chat might take a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but if you're chatting with 50 young kids online, then the likelihood of there being a successful, grooming chat or solicitation is pretty high, because we call it the spray and pray method. They're spraying and praying, and they are chatting with multiple victims at the same time, and they're going to then decide which victim that is the most vulnerable that they want to spend their time on.
And, you've hit on it just a little bit a few moments ago, but you just, talked a little bit about it right now, the distinction that we're seeing with the young boys and young girls online. Girls may take a little bit longer based on the research, and boys it may be a little bit quicker. However, are you seeing a difference between boys and girls in terms of who's more vulnerable in these situations online?
Yes. So statistically speaking, we do see that adolescents in general are the most likely to be targeted. So we're, again, talking about kind of 14, 15, 16-year-olds in general. And that is because they're the ones that have the most access to technology. They probably have a little bit more freedom than maybe somebody who is 8 or 10 years old, right? Who has more parental restrictions and isn't allowed to use some of the social media apps like, Instagram, for example, that has age restrictions. But when we start to look at gender differences, we see that females are more likely to be victims of online grooming. But again, that's probably because boys are less likely to report it. And then boys are more likely to be victims of that kind of sexual extortion scam where I was talking about, where they are going to be asked to send a picture. And then once they do, they are asked to send money. Otherwise, they'll share their nudes and send it to their friends.
Who are the perpetrators, and what's been done to keep kids and teens safe in these spaces? As we've learned so far, online child exploitation comes in many different forms, including online grooming, enticement, and solicitation. Right now, I'm joined by Catherine Siegfried Spiller. She is a professor in the School of Criminal Justice at Michigan State University and is an expert on the criminal behaviors behind online child sex offenders. Now, Professor, we'll transition to some common misconceptions about what danger looks like online. Now, stranger danger is a standard concept taught to most children. It tells them to avoid unknown adults, don't approach unknown vehicles, and don't fall for tricks like there's puppies in my car. How did the internet, that simple stuff used to seem so like, watch out for those little things, but now it's turned into so much more. How did the internet increase risks associated with strangers?
Yeah, I wish it was that simple, that it was stranger danger, but in fact, it's not. So just as in when we think about, kind of the traditional forms of child sexual, abuse and exploitation, so in the physical world, online is not much different. So a lot of times these offenders are somehow embedded in the child's life. They might be a friend of a friend, or they could be a coach, even a teacher. And in fact, it also could involve peer grooming. So we're seeing instances where, the children's, a friend of the child, someone who's the same age as them is also, grooming them for pictures and asking for nudes. And so it's not stranger danger. Essentially, yes, it could be anybody on the internet because your child has access to the internet, but it's probably somebody that does have some familiarity. And I think it's interesting because, in this generation of, being an internet user, when we say, oh, I have a friend online, yes, you may never have met this person in the physical world, but the word friend is so different to us now. This could be somebody that you've been chatting with for a month, or again, maybe somebody that was a friend of a friend, right? Like I met this person through somebody that I do know. And this person ended up chatting with me, sending me, a random message. And now, this individual is exploiting me. So I think it's really important to move away from stranger danger and know that the likelihood is that this person probably has some sort of familiarity and connection with that child.
Professor, recently we had the documentary that went pretty viral. The Unknown Number was on Netflix, and it was the story of the mother cyberbullying her daughter through an unknown number. And that was one of my first thoughts during this conversation was the misconception that the offenders are complete strangers when they can be much closer to who we are. So if you could just expand on that a little bit more, because these offenders are not just strangers a lot of the time.
Yeah, and also the misconception, as in the example you gave, that these offenders are always men.
Yeah.
right? Older
Yeah.
men. And that's just not the case. And so it's essentially anybody who has access to the internet could be an offender, could be a potential victim. And again, it's normally going to be somebody that has some sort of connection. So a family friend, maybe somebody through church or through, a sports team. But there is going to be some sort of connection. Very rarely does it end up being somebody that's completely unknown and a complete stranger.
So, Professor, instead of focusing on bad people, recognizing patterns of behavior has become the focus. Why is that distinction so important right now?
Yeah, so I think what's really key here is helping kids communicate what's happening and also parents knowing what kind of questions to ask. We can't just assume that technology is going to be able to keep us safe, with our parental controls and our age restrictions, and that social media is going to be, monitoring behaviors. We also have some stake in the game. And so making sure that we know the ways in which we can talk to our kids and also give our kids ways in which they can communicate what's happening. Because, again, I don't think kids know that they're being groomed. They don't understand that this is deception and that they are being manipulated.
So let's just stick with the parents for a little while here, Professor. The word grooming is often associated with fear. From a research perspective, what's a more holistic way to frame the conversation when parents are engaging about safety online?
Yeah, so I would have to definitely recommend the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They have a great website called NetSmarts, and it's SMARTZ. You can go online as a parent or a guardian, and they have a bunch of resources for different age groups and how to talk about sexual extortion or solicitation with your kid. The big thing is obviously using age-appropriate language. And I think the most important thing is not to call it grooming, but to really remind the child that this is somebody that is using deception, that they are lying, that they are pretending to be somebody that they're not. Because I think, kids just are very trusting. And so if somebody says, I'm 15 years old or I'm 20 years old online and and I'm male or female, I think they believe this. They don't perceive the online space as a place where people are going to lie and use deception and manipulation. And so I think that those are kind of some key words to use. And then also encouraging your child to just be open. Oh, did you get a friend request today? Who's your new friend? Where did you meet this person? Have you ever met this person in the physical world? Or do you really know much about this individual? And start asking really good questions.
And why can fear-based messaging sometimes backfire when we're trying to protect the children and have these conversations and really be open?
Yeah, I think it's because it's like everything. The more that we tell kids don't do something, and don't do this, they're going to do it, right? Don't watch this movie or don't play this video game. You're just going to do it at your friend's house. And so if you tell them that the internet is a scary place and that there's bad people on there, then that doesn't allow them to really navigate the space in a way in which they can figure out who are really good people and really great friends that they might end up interacting with and networking. And so we can't just paint everybody with a broad brush and say that the internet is a horrible place, it's dangerous. And the more you restrict, they're more likely just going to go someplace else and keep it a secret and not tell you that they're using these social media apps. And so that's why it's really important that you try to create those open communication lines. Otherwise, they're just going to do it in secrecy.
And when we're opening up these conversations, especially parents and guardians and those who are interacting with kids on a day-to-day basis, how do you open up this conversation without, without putting shame or fear onto the child themselves for the act or being the victim of this situation? How do you stop them from feeling that shame of being a victim of online child exploitation?
Yeah, I think the thing is, believing your child. And so letting the child know that, they're not going to get in trouble because they were taken advantage of by somebody, right? They were manipulated. This was an adult that manipulated you, that deceived you. And so it's not your fault. Because a lot of kids this is so sad, but they would rather keep it a secret and go through the shame of it. And also, they're afraid they're going to lose their technology. So they're afraid that, well, mom and dad's going to take my phone away, or my parents are going to take my phone away. And I would rather just not tell them that I just did this, or I just experienced this. And so I think it's really important to remember that's what kids are thinking. So you want them to know that it's not their fault, that they were taken advantage of, and then encourage them to trust their feelings. So if something feels weird, trust that feeling. And if something seems kind of confusing or off, or if somebody's making them feel bad, and making them feel guilt tripping them, then they want to trust those feelings.
And is it a tracker or a monitor on a child's device? Is that way too much for a parent, or do you think it's just enough to make sure that the child is protected when they are in these online spaces?
No, absolutely. So I always think that parents should use parental controls. Obviously, there's going to be differences. So if you're talking about an 8-year-old, compared to a 15 and 16-year-old, and also your child best. And so what might be right for your 13-year-old may not be right for, your 8-year-old who becomes 13, right? I mean, they mature differently, their understanding of technology. And so I also think it's important to, again, not have just, general rules that always apply to your 13-year-old or your 12-year-old. The big thing is knowing your kid and also knowing how they might change. So are they starting to keep secrets? Are they getting mad at you if you're asking to look at their, text messages, or if you are continuing to monitor them? Have you noticed mood swings or isolation? Are they, not wanting to do things? Are they withdrawing from family activities? And so these are all kind of behavioral changes as well that parents should be on the lookout for.
And Professor, for myself and parents as well, but I'm an aunt of 7 and I post tons of pictures all the time. And now that we're in this digital age and we're seeing what we're seeing happening with the images and just with children in general, what do you tell people about posting pictures, even innocent pictures of their family members, their children?
Yeah, so there's something called notification apps, which is becoming a big problem. And again, this is becoming a problem in, middle and high schools. And so essentially, individuals can take any picture that a parent might post, and they can then nudify it. So they can actually make that the child in those images nude and naked. And it's a form of AI that's being used to create child sexual exploitation material. And it's awful. And so parents should be, they should be concerned about posting pictures like that. I know I have a niece and nephew as well. And, I'm always really concerned about the things that get posted and shared, because the likelihood that somebody's taking that image and running it through an AI is possible. Yeah. It's always possible.
Yeah. I think about that so often now. Just, it's something I didn't think about even 10 years ago. Now it's just at the front of my mind. Like, should we post these pictures, and in whose hands are they going to fall into? Nefarious hands they're going to fall into. However, today we've discussed a lot of opportunities for minors to be exposed and exploited. Can you give us a sign of hope or any type of encouraging signs you have right now in terms of research or protecting children in these spaces?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of technology that is being developed right now. So I know, we're doing some chat analysis to better understand the ways in which offenders are grooming and building trust with these minors. By understanding kind of their tactics, we can then help, hopefully develop technology that can identify and red flag those types of conversations. But I really do think that, the hope is going to be tech companies coming forward and saying that, they want to help make their social media platforms a safer place. Parents, guardians saying that they want to start having these really difficult and awkward conversations and opening up those communication lines and building trust with their own kids, that if something happens, that they won't get in trouble, that they can come to them. And then obviously the research side, by us understanding, why are these offenders going online in the first place and engaging in grooming? Is there a way in which we can try to prevent some of this from a behavioral standpoint? And I really do think it's going to be all hands on deck because this problem is just so pervasive.
Professor Catherine Siegfried Speller is a professor of the School of Criminal Justice at Michigan State University. I want to say thank you so much for joining us today and discussing online child exploitation and all of its issues that we're facing right now as a society. Professor, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a privilege.
Coming up, how the players in the Negro Leagues left legacies that impacted more than just the sport. You all stay right there. This is The Metro.